What's going on, all you gamers? Today we're going over a little bit more of the Ascent. So if you're struggling to work out the stats, can't work out what's going on with your build, then stay tuned. That's coming up next. Welcome back, all you guys and girls. As always, for all things gaming, for all things Xbox, then why not hit that subscribe and bell icon? I'll bring you all the latest and greatest gaming, hints, tips, guides and builds, and just some fun gameplay to boot. But for today, if you're struggling with your build and can't work out the stats, then hopefully this guy right here, this funky, really badly dressed guy, should be able to help you. Now, the main thing you need to know, if you look at your attributes, you have 4 main attributes. So cybernetics, motorics, biometrics and frame. Now these by themselves do not mean much at all, and also there's a lot of things you can do with them. It seems simple enough at the start, but then as you start to play the game, you realise that as you unlock more stuff, there's a big chance that this will play a role in how you want to factor your attributes and how you want to allocate your skill points. Now while we're here, the main thing that you want to take note of, that they don't really tell you but does make sense as soon as you realise, and that's the colours of them. So if you have a little look, the cybernetics is green, the motorics is light blue, the biometrics is orange and the frame is purple. There's a reason for that. Other things tally up into it, meaning they'll make them stronger. So what you're going to do is have a little look at some of the other stuff you've got. So this first one we're going to go over is tactical sense. Determines the amount of tactical charge gained for damage inflicted. As you can see, like I said, associated with the cybernetics attribute. As we said, it's green, means cybernetics, but the main thing you want to know, if you're boosting this up, what it's going to do, it will affect your tactical charge. Or on your loadout, for example, just over here, whatever your tactical is. It basically means that this right here will be able to refresh faster. Next up, and this one's just a nice, easy, straightforward one, it's critical hit rate. Determines the critical hit rate. Basically, the higher you've got this up, the more chance you've got of getting that crit chance, meaning you'll do significant damage, especially with your weapons. So next up, and we've got weapon handling. Determines the reload and weapons swap speed. Now as you can see, I've boosted this one to 20 on this fella. It means that in most cases you'll have nigh on no actual kind of reloading time. On some of them you still do, the really long ones, but on the lower ones you have almost no cooldown, meaning you don't actually reload. If you've got a significant reload time, then you still have a slight one, unfortunately, where it has to chuck it into the mag. But all in all, you save a lot of time if you've got a really long reload time, or you just do not reload at all if you've got a shorter reload time on some of your guns, like this one right here. A really nice one to chuck into builds if you like to shoot a lot but don't like any downtime. Next up, aiming. Determines the weapon spread recovery rate. Now this doesn't apply to everything as far as I'm aware, but certain ones, for example probably SMGs or miniguns, everything that you've got a really high rate of fire where the reticule's going to go out a little bit and you're not going to hit quite as accurately, you're going to want to boost your aiming, and it will mean you'll have a lot more significant damage because you're going to be hitting the target better. Next up, and we've got balance. This determines the resistance to stun, knockbacks and stagger, and the movement penalty for moving while firing heavy weapons. All in all, if you've got an absolutely huge chunky gun, you're going to want to make sure you've got some of it into this, otherwise your frame's going to be a bit unsturdy and you're going to struggle to walk around with those guns and it's not going to work in your favour. If you're using a really big minigun or something to that liking, you're probably going to want a bit in balance. Next up, and we've got evasion. Now I've got this at 0, but ultimately I would definitely like it higher. Determines the evasion cooldown speed. Right here is, how can I put it, the roll dodge mechanic. The higher up it is, the more you can basically spam these bad boys. If you have a little look, there's a little bit of a downtime on my one. You can do it a lot faster the higher up that you've got that, meaning that you can get into cover, or you can run away using your roll dodge, or you can just actually get places faster because it is a faster movement speed than actually running. Next up, and we've got one of the most important ones in my book, and that's vital signs. Determines your max health. You are definitely going to want to put some in this, it's all down to you how much you want to put in it, but I would honestly say this one is probably one of the most integral ones to put into almost all builds. The lower you have of this, the lower health pool you have. The higher, meaning you've got a lot more to take off, meaning you're going to last longer and you're not going to get one shot. If this was at 0 at later levels, there's a good chance, unless you've got a crazy build that kind of negates all damage, you're going to get hit hard and you're going to fall over quite often. And finally, we go after body battery. This right here determines your max energy capacity. How can I put it? This, I would say, if you're someone who really likes to spam your abilities, which obviously come from your augments, then this will be one that you'll definitely want to put up. The more you have on this, it gives you the attribute over to the right. So if you have a little look at mine at the moment is energy 304. The lower it is, the less you'll be able to get at, and you'll have to do a lot of damage and such, and moving around and making sure that you're kind of in battle whilst you're not able to use any kind of skills whatsoever. If this is really high, you can use a lot of skills, and it just makes it so that you're very skill based. Right, so that's the basics out of the way. Now I'm going to show you how it actually affects your build and going towards that certain character build you're after. So if you go over to your armor and click on this, again, if you have a little look, they've all got stats on the right hand side there. Now those stats there, if you click in your left analog, it's going to tell you exactly what they are. Physical, energy, digital and fire. Now the top lot is basically what you're going to negate. So the lower they are, it means the more damage you're going to take. You want to get these as high as possible, because if you've got really low resists, say for example you had 0 for melee or physical, then if you get hit by a katana up close, you're probably going to take the full brunt of the damage, meaning one shots will be inevitable and you'll fall over frequently. Now if I remember correctly, physical is your main source of damage from early game and late game and pretty much all the way through the game, so physical will be one you'll definitely want to put up. A lot of enemies have this and you're always going to get hit from time to time. Energy tends to be any kind of, I believe it's mercenaries and such, anyone who's going to hit you with any of those energy weapons, that right there is going to take effect like that. You do definitely get some of this, so you do have to be mindful of physical and energy. One that you don't have to worry about quite as much is probably the digital. That one right there tends to be the hackers and such. You don't get as many that I've seen so far in the game. So if it was myself, I wouldn't put this quite as high as the rest, or it'd be one that you wouldn't have to worry about as much. But it is still something you have to factor in, and probably having it at 0 means you'd be in a lot of trouble in certain situations or in areas. Finally, you've got fire, and this one obviously refers to fire. There's a few things, I think there's some of the ferals and such that do it. You're probably going to get hit by a mortar blast or something. Anything that sets you alight, the lower you've got of this means you've got a lot of chance of taking that full damage and you're going to wipe. So all in all, you want to make sure you're as rounded as possible. Obviously, this is per piece of gear. So if, say for example on that one, I've got 0 on the fire, it doesn't matter, I can always make it up by putting on something down here such as this one, and that one will have 15 fire. There's quite a few things you can do with your build, but all in all you want to make sure it's rounded so that your stats are as high as possible, where you feel like you're quite confident in being able to battle and not falling over because you're getting hit just way too hard. For example, just to show you that, if you have a little look at my defense, it's physical 66, energy 55, digital 22 and fire 43. It's by no means the best, but like I said, you want to have a little bit on everything if you possibly can, just so that you're okay in all situations. The higher the better, but it all comes down to what you've managed to pick up and how you're building your character. It may well be that you've put a little bit more into kind of offensiveness, and you may have to veer a little bit away from certain bits of defense. Next up, and we've got the attributes. Now I've only got 2 on here because of how I've allocated my skill points, but you get head, upper body, internal and lower body. Now as you can see, my ones are really high on upper body and internal, and the other ones aren't even on there. Now the reason for that is, if you saw earlier, it's because I haven't got much in them. If I started factoring into these, so as you can see I've put 26 into these bottom 2, and because I've done that I've got 26 on internal. Upper body I've jumped up to here and I've got 20 plus 5, and the other 5 comes from nice and easy, just up the top, upper body there is 5, meaning that obviously makes the 30. So as you can see, you also get bits on your armor that go into that as well. It's mainly just an overview of how you've got your skills allocated, and so that you can see how that will factor into some of your augments and such once you chuck them on. Next up, and we've got boosts. So as you can see, I've got body energy, evasion, weapon handling and spread reduction. Again, these come from whatever your armor is. So if I click on here, because I've got them on, you'll see that just down the bottom I've got boosts to body energy. If I go over to my torso, I've got a boost to evasion, and finally on my legs I've got a boost to weapon handling and spread reduction. So a lot of times, even though they might not look the coolest, you'll find yourself picking a certain piece of gear that you really want to go into those categories. Again, like I said, just mainly remember the colour of them. That's the main thing. As long as you know what the colours represent, then you'll know how you're factoring it in and how tough your guy's going to be once it's on there. So from these stats, you now know exactly what you're doing. Obviously, you're going to want to make sure you've got a bit of defense about yourself, otherwise you're going to fall over. The more you've got, the lot easier it's going to be. Also, hand in hand with the defense is definitely how much health pool you've got. The more health you've got, the more you've chucked into vitality, the easier the game's going to be. The more you're going to stay alive, the less you're going to be restarting your missions. Obviously, your attributes is dependent on how many you've put into what when you use your skill points. And your boosts, again, that comes from pretty much what you've got on your armor, as of course does some of the attributes, which will boost up other key things, which we're going to go over now. So here's the fun part. Augmentations. Think of these as your kind of either passives or your skills. So if you have a little look down these bottom two, these are your passives. They're really nice, they can keep you alive, or they can do a couple of other things. But the main thing you'll want to look at is these right here. So for example, if I go onto here, my hydraulic slam. A punch delivered from the massive hydraulic force propels enemies away from you. The hydraulic slam aug was made for the Chrome Dome arena fights, but serves equally well in crowded combat situations. But here's the thing you want to look at. Just down the bottom there, in blue, Motorix increases the damage. Until you start getting into the game, until you start actually unlocking things, you may well have put a build together that completely doesn't work with what skills and such you're actually, or augments shall I say, you're actually using later on. Because now, if you really want hydraulic slam to do very good damage and you really like using it, you're going to want to make sure you've put lots in Motorix. But it may not factor into what weapon you're using, so you may have to adjust it that way, or you may have to work out what kind of a build you're going for. So for example, with me, if you have a little look, I've got 30 in upper body. That means that I'm going to hit like an absolute truck. Of course, then you want to work out what you want for your other skill, but the main thing to do is have a little look at them. Down the bottom will tell you what key elements or what attributes they all refer to. Just there, biometrics, meaning your orange ones. Just down here, your green ones. Just over here, your purple ones. The colour of these represents what you want mostly to have attributed into to up your damage and make your build really, really powerful. Honestly, you can do a lot of things in this game, or you could make it so that they're slightly hit less or have less duration, but you've then factored it in so that you've got better firepower. It's all down to how you want your build to be. If you want a very skill based build where you're using them very often, you're hitting very hard, you're going to want to go to your augments, you're going to want to see what factors into it and do it this way. If you're not too worried and you're doing enough damage, or they're lasting long enough, or whatever it tells you on here, for example with this one you're going to get more health for the monobot. If it's falling over a lot, you're probably going to want to invest some into cybernetics. If it's not, then you may well be cool and you may be able to chuck your attributes into another place. Right, I'm sure I've been speaking for long enough, but hopefully that's kind of gave you a little bit of insight into it. It took me a while to work out, and if I have botched anything up, let me know, because I kind of did this on the fly, but hopefully that right there should give you a little bit of a hint and make you hit a little bit harder and have a lot more fun playing. There'll be lots more guides, hints, tips and builds. As always, take care. I'll see you on the next day.